So for a striking bit of irony right now in this country, we have people protesting the involvement of states in their personal supposed healthcare decisions. All while our own president is actually sending amendments to the WHO to hand over control of our healthcare system to a global body. Anyone?
Unbelievable. Totally shocked when I saw this story come across my Telegram this morning. Could not believe it. And it just bespeaks, let me give you the headline here, folks, and then I'll let Aaron comment a little bit, and then I'll kind of give you what I think the headline should be. Headline reads...
Let me do anything.
I'll obedient listen to Aaron as my tyrant overlord. We're practicing being lefties here today, so I need to shut up and sit down and not have opinions of my own. All right, so it says... okay.
I'm just agreeing. All right,
go. It's the headline is Biden handing over U.S. sovereignty to the WHO. Your thoughts, Aaron?
Well, I mean, like I just started, it's so freaking ironic, man. It is so crazy ironic that we're sitting here talking about, we actually have people in our streets fighting and protesting over supposed autonomy of their body and what they can, women's right to choose, this, that, and the other. All while our president is sending amendments to the WHO to hand over control of our healthcare system to this global body that, is going to only be further unaccountable, like even more so than the one that we're presently entertaining. And it's just so you care about bodily autonomy, and yet right now we are sending control of our healthcare system, or the possible amendments that would lead to control of our healthcare system, over to a global body that's, as far as I can tell, just completely unaccountable to anyone. How's that going to turn out? How's that one going to... It's clear that this stuff is just complete. It's just a complete show in front of us right now. Most of these people don't even care. If they care about their bodily autonomy, I don't know. I feel like it's just an emotional frenzy that has words involved with it for most people, but it's something they don't actually take serious. Because this is dangerous, man.
Well, yeah, the entire discussion about you should be forced to get a vaccine. I'm a lefty. I think you should be forced to get a vaccine for the good of society. But then 3 months, 4 months, 5 months later, I'm going to be in front of the Supreme Court protesting my body, my right. The same person can do that without any cognitive issues, without any notice of the radical lack of consistency is just insane.
Yeah.
But these are the useful idiots that Karl Marx wrote about in the Communist Manifesto. At the end of chapter 1, he notes the fact that he calls them it depends on the translation you look at, but he calls them the underbelly of society. In another translation, he calls them the filth of society. And the actual phrase, the useful idiots, actually comes out of the Communist Manifesto there at the end of chapter 1. So pretty interesting, because that's what, basically the United States has produced is a ever-growing populace of useful idiots that can advance their tyranny.
Yeah, it's this one, you just introduced this story to me this morning. Of course, we just ran into the story this morning, so we've been working on kind of digesting this one. I don't even at this point. I don't even know what to say. Clearly, if our president can just send amendments over to a body like that hands over that kind of power. Where's it's like a broken record now. It's I guess right now we should just accept the fact that our Constitution doesn't mean anything, because you shouldn't be able to hand over this kind of wide, this kind of sweeping power to a body like this without representation. Right?
Yeah, no, this is right. As I was saying, I think that, really the title, so the title that they gave it is Biden handing over U.S. sovereignty to the WHO. I think you should probably, the real story, if you go and read this, and again, this is in my Telegram, we're rebranding that to Well-Mannered Monsters, but this will be where we kind of, unless Aaron puts it on the screen, which sometimes he does, when he edits this. But if you ever want to go look and read this stuff yourself, we compile everything there. And I think the title really should be, because the real story here is about the Constitution, and I think the title should be something like Biden administration demonstrates the irrelevance of the Constitution as it codifies globalist law over U.S. citizens. That would be, after reading the article, that's what I would rename it. And just so you know, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution reads thus, quote, the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion, and on application of the legislature or of the executive, when the legislature cannot be convened, against domestic violence. So, as Aaron just noted, a republican form of government is one that's built on the authority of the people, the authority to provide representation, and their authority, because remember, in the U.S. system of governance, rights and authority comes from God to the individual. Individual outsources that to representatives that we send to Congress and the House. And then that's the legislative body. And from that, and then the executive branch, we also set up. So we outsource all of our authority from the ground up rather than from the top down. And so what Aaron just said, a Republican, don't miss this in this Article 4 in Section 4 of the Constitution. A Republican form of government means that the three branches are working as checks and balance to prevent any one branch from domineering over the others. And of course, the executive branch, in this case, the Biden administration, sending amendments for the WHO charter that's constituted by the World Health, I guess it's called the World Health Alliance, and it's composed of the UN nations, basically giving them governance and even military power. If you read this, it says that basically WHO, Tedros, can decide to move military assets against the people of the United States or any other country if he deems that their health emergency or their health situation is a danger to other countries. So this is totally wild, but it just shows how far and irrelevant the Constitution, how far from the public mind and how irrelevant the Constitution really is that this is happening.
No, it clearly doesn't matter, which is why, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but why the conservative movement could do itself some serious good by rebranding and actually becoming, just rebranding to something that has a little more consideration towards, fighting, taking ground, that kind of thing, not actually conserving something, but now taking back that which has been taken from us. It's, at this point, what are we conserving? What is the Conservative Party actually doing? That name suggests, that name is seriously outdated, considering the time that we're in right now. We're past conservation.
It's probably part. I don't know where the name came from, if it was self-chosen or otherwise. If I were going to guess, because I think it plays into the lefty narrative and framing, I think it probably has been something that's been put on us. Because, of course, there are progressives, which suggest advancement or something positive, right? And then conservatives suggest, you're stagnant, you're sedentary, you're not moving, you're just staying where you're at. It sounds boring and old. And so it really plays nicely into the leftist framing and narrative.
Well, and to some degree, perhaps the leftist narrative on that end is actually more honest or more truthful. As far as progression goes, they seem to have at least a grasp on a concept that I've spoken about for a while now, and that's the fact that, if you're not taking ground, you're not conserving anything. And so on this particular one, it's just conservation, the idea of it is really important. But in this particular life, there's a lot of other complex framework that has to be going on in order for that to happen. You have to be fighting. You have to actually be taking ground in different fronts. And the left, that name alone, progressivism. To that end, I don't agree with most of the stuff that they fight for, but at least their name on that end has something closer to the truth in regards to what needs to be done on the ground. That's you have to be going forward. You have to be going forward. If not, you're going backwards.
Yeah, well, the whole, what's really interesting is the entire framework of conservatism, as it's built upon Judeo-Christian values, is really has this narrative, this underlying scriptural narrative of basically conforming to this, like, the excellence of God and transforming into something you aren't. So it's interesting that the scriptural basis of the notion of conservatism is does have this underlying, it's what's called sanctification, but it's progress. You need to be changing into something ever more excellent. And I mean, really, at the beginning and end of the day, without, so we don't want to go churchy here, but I mean, like, think of this in terms of excellence. And of course, you're going to have to make a decision about what good and evil is if you're going to have any notion of
I
excellence
suppose.
or beauty for that matter. And
I mean,
go ahead,
I
go ahead.
suppose and that sanctification reference was actually really, really good. That's a great thing to tie into this conversation. And guys, sorry for my voice right now. I've been fighting allergies like crazy. But considering that, dude, that's I mean, drill into that as far as the sanctification side and just the pushing forward because I mean, even when it comes to things like the Constitution, I think a lot of times we have this like hard-lined approach. That whole living versus the non-living document. Like, understand, and I actually agree with that whole non-living document argument. But it's a foundation we've been given to build on, and I don't think we've done that very well as conservatives, as right-leaning people or Christians. It's one of those things where most of our energy spend towards essentially just like protecting this thing in its place, like where it was originated from, instead
Well,
of
yeah. So yeah,
actually. Yeah, go, man.
let's speak to the living versus non-living document, because you actually have the identical thing that occurs when you look at various scriptural traditions, whether that be the Bible, Quran, what have you. It doesn't really matter. So the question is, does its meaning, its intent change based on its audience, or is the meaning and intent locked in based on the author's intention? And so this was a big issue across all literary theory. And I mean, the conservatives are typically going to say it's a non living document, meaning that the intent and meaning of it is locked in when the authors penned it, because it's the author's intent that matters. Now the lefties are going to say, well, no, we gotta change the meanings to the way that the meaning we understand those meanings today, and then kind of put those meanings into the text. Okay, so the reader becomes the author on the lefty way. So it's really weird, and this gets convoluted real quick. But with that being said, I mean, these are the two, really, like, two sides of the conversation, and why one's going to say it's a living document and the other one's going to say it's non-living. Now, the like you say, how we advance the conversation with it being a non-living document is that we become what's called excellent interpreters of culture and what's happening in society, so that we can apply a non-living document, so its original meaning and intent, we can apply those things accurately, favorably, and advance the original meaning and the original intent of Scripture or the Constitution into ever new context with great
Yeah.
skill. And that's what makes us look relevant. That's where we advance in the cultural conversation and cultural war, is that we advance the constitutional notions into ever new domains with skill. And that's why calling it the non-living versus living document argument sometimes, again, could play to the leftist framing of things, because it makes you sound uninteresting, dead, boring, etc. Right? So it's more like the leftists want to, like, reinterpret the Constitution, so we should call them reinterpreters of the Constitution, whereas the people on the right, the conservatives, want to reapply its original meaning.
Yeah.
So it'd be reinterpreters versus reappliers would really be the
Well,
framework there.
and it's not, obviously the framers didn't just have this idea of simply building on it, but also humbly understood the need to change it as, I mean, anything scientific or anything that's actually halfway decently connect with the world around you, you understand that certain knowledge comes about that requires you to change things, hence the ability to amend the Constitution. It's not that it's this completely stagnant thing, that they set something completely in stone, although I do think there's certain parts, the Bill of Rights, that they did intend actually to be something that was completely set in stone in some ways, and I actually agree with that in large part. Those the Bill of Rights actually outlined certain particular rights that just transcend culture in large part, much like parts of the like the Ten Commandments. There's most of that just transcends culture and is one of the reasons why cultures that had nothing to do with each other actually had a framework that was rather similar in regards to not stealing, not murdering, doing any number of different parts of, what is featured in the Ten Commandments, because some of the ideas there actually do transcend whatever happens in the cultures underlying. But there's parts of it, hence the ability to amend the Constitution, that do, need to move with the times as knowledge changes. But there are certain parts of it that I actually think should just simply be fixed. And in this particular case, if we're talking about what happened in a previous podcast when we were talking about abortion, like, we believe that's murder. And, that's one thing that we think should be rather fixed, that there shouldn't be too much of a debate on that one, that culture should have this very strong trend towards protecting human life at all stages for the sake of the health of that culture overall. So that's one that, you and I think would probably argue isn't really living. It needs to be fixed in stone and perpetuated into the future.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, there's no argument from me on that end. And I'm going to come back to this in just a second. Remind me to come back to the whole decisive nature of good and evil. We're going to come back to that because, again, this is another lefty narrative that they kind of frame out for you. That's a false. And we've talked about it before, but I want to delve in a little bit more here with the notion of neutrality. But let me read the headline related to this story on Tedros, the WHO, and the Biden administration, now that we've kind of set the constitutional framework for it.
Tedros,
the
war criminal.
Tedros, if you know his back history in Ethiopia, it's not a great look. I don't have time to go into that now, but you can check that out yourself. So, Dr. Peter Breggin, if the amendments pass on May 22nd through May 28th, WHO Director General Tedros can declare a health emergency in a country without consulting with the country, without getting any information from the country, and if the country resists, he can go ahead and within 24 to 48 hours begin to mobilize all the resources of the UN against the country. So just so you understand, the UN has military, FYI. He doesn't even have to know the source or the exact nature of the emergency. So they're making him a dictator over the declaration of all health emergencies in any countries involved in the WHO.
Yeah,
and what's really insidious about the U.S. in this, and this is why the U.S. government under Biden, like we are the bad guy, it would seem. He's the one that proposed these amendments. The Biden administration isn't just saying we're going to sign on. They're the ones that proposed them.
Yeah, because we are the UN, right? I mean, the UN wouldn't exist without our backing at present.
Correct. Yeah. So the UN is kind of the globalist controlled arm of the United States taxation system. It's sad to say, but I mean,
probably one of the most tragic in hindsight things that the greatest generation provided us was.
Agreed. Yeah, because the Great Generation, those heroes from World War II, such remarkable people. I mean, my wife's grandparents are still alive. They're really old and just what they lived through, what they did, and who they are. Like, I know them as people. They're still alive. Both of them are in their 90s, you know. But really remarkable, incredible people. Just so different, cut from a different cloth. But unfortunately, the establishment of the UN. And can you blame them? You just had this major world war that led to its uprising, but it's still a tragic situation.
I think it's one of those things you see just looking back, where you can have the greatest of good intentions and set something in motion that just produces such a far-reaching and almost unstoppable evil through doing it. It's an interesting one.
What's the impetus here? I want to ask you a question. What's the impetus here, Aaron? And let me give you what I think, and then I want to hear what you think. But
why would
why did the Biden administration do this? Yeah, here's my theory. My theory is that the forced vaccination in the United States, because of our Constitution and our states as a convention of states and not a top-down federal government like many countries, has been wildly unsuccessful here. So they basically have to outsource. They basically have to try to take away the rights of the states to resist the federal government by outsourcing it to some global governance, which I'm not sure how that's going to go. That sounds like another world war. And I try to imagine, the UN sending military units here to quarantine or take people from their homes in Florida under DeSantis.
Blue-colored vehicles with white hats.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't imagine what DeSantis would do. It would be insane. I mean, can you imagine that? Like, that sounds really crazy to us, and but
I mean,
maybe that could happen.
It sounds crazy, people, to think about that kind of thing happening, but I believe that for most of the people listening to this, what's happened just recently in Australia probably sounded like it would be crazy too. And you literally had their health professionals going from door to door with actual army and police forces, like pulling people from their homes who weren't vaccinated.
Yeah, I saw the most tragic video of a little girl drugged from her daddy's arm, screaming, and the nurses are like dragging her down the hall, like something out of a straight up like, a sane asylum horror.
Yeah, and we look at Australia as a pretty developed country, and guys, do not forget, like, that just happened and is still presently happening in Australia, like that kind of tyranny. So it's one of those test grounds for this global military. I mean, would you almost call it like a militarized health force?
It is. Well, yeah, and they have really scary. They have like I was telling you before in the pre-show, they have very scary. They're like family health services SWAT team that they use to go and like abduct kids from their families. And I say abduct because they would say they're coming in to protect them, but like, oh, your family isn't healthy enough, so we're going to come take you. And just so you know, if you go and you start digging into the UN, their behavior in these various, especially African countries, where there's not a lot of global eyes on it, what they do with kids isn't a real happy. And I can't go any deeper than that because I don't know the details and I don't want to misrepresent. But it's not.
And
it's
again,
not
at risk of just seeming like a nauseating Elon Musk fan, but there doesn't actually seem to be an individual of his particular caliber that's actually involving themselves in things like this. I mean, he just recently, I think it was, 2 months ago, when he had that, I don't know if you want to, it wasn't a rant of any kind. He sent out tweets accusing the UN of exactly that, of being sex trafficking and human traffickers. It was wild. It was wild, the accusations Elon Musk came out with against the UN.
I remember that. Yeah, I covered that on my channel.
Yeah, I mean,
he was. Well, sorry,
guys,
and
I know
he
Elon
was citing,
Musk has come into this channel over and over again, but for whatever reason, at the center of a lot of these like big happenings right now, he's one of the only people who are like actually calling this kind of thing out. And to that end, if he ends up being mentioned multiple times just due to the fact that, he's one of the only prominent people inserting himself in some rather important movements, then we're not going to deify him by any means. But, it's like, those accusations were wild, dude. He took on one of the most powerful organizations in the planet and just straight up called them out as human traffickers, sex traffickers. Which I would like to know more about. And if that's the case, like, should we not be looking at dissolving this sucker?
Well, for sure. I mean, yeah. So, you don't need to deify Elon Musk. It's just the fact that you want to draw attention to somebody that's that big of a name that's willing to actually put his name on the line. And even his freedom, he's making himself a target. Those aren't small things. Recently, he tweeted, if I happen to suicide myself, it's been good knowing you.
No. If I happen to die in a weird way or something like that, then it's been nice knowing you.
Okay. Gotcha. If you happen to die in a weird way. So, yeah, just really concerning recent tweets of his. But you look at who he's taking on. And to go conspiratorial on you, not that I'm saying we need to believe it, but, I mean, the only one other person that was really pointing these things out publicly was Trump. Trump did it a little bit more obliquely, where he wouldn't call people out directly all the time, a little bit more indirect. But then obviously that the whole Q phenomena basically details this in radical amount of specificity. And so there's some interesting, you don't need to believe the entire Q stuff just to say that it's interesting that they had detailed much of this, and there's tremendous, as you continue to drill down on some of the claims, and then names like Elon Musk start coming out and say, yeah, this type of sex trafficking stuff is well known. Elon Musk cited multiple news stories when he did that. So all of a sudden you say these crazy conspiracy things aren't really that far
Yeah,
out.
I mean, and to be quite honest, like the flip side of this one, I would like to know how he was so sure that that was the case. I mean, that's the part that never came out. Is he made some very, very direct claims, but what didn't follow is it's like, dude, how do you know this? Like, what's going on specifically that you know about that is evidence to this happening? Like, I want to know about that. I want to know about what happened with Epstein and his customers. Those kinds of things. It's
Yeah, I want to know what's happening with that too. The whole Ghislaine Maxwell trial they've been keeping totally private. It was supposed to be covered, and Twitter shut down the one channel that was covering it. So thanks a lot, Twitter. By the way, did you guys see that Elon Musk just said that the deal's on hold unless they can provide him the truth that 5% or less of the accounts on Twitter are bots?
oh wow.
Yeah, he basically said, because basically what it says is, he says he wants to see that 5% or less of the accounts are fake or bots. He needs that provided to him, and the deal's on hold until then. And he did that because, obviously, as a matter of monetization
Yeah.
and being profitable, he's doing two things at once. He's exposing probably how people on the right are probably the vast majority, whereas a lot of times Twitter will make you feel like you're the minority because you have all
Yeah.
these bots. So he's exposing that while at the same time saying he tanked Twitter's price. Twitter's price fell 19%. So he's probably going to be able to come back to the table and get an even better price. So pretty masterful
Yeah.
move.
Yeah. No, it's definitely that this particular chapter in Twitter's history is becoming quite interesting. Getting back to this WHO, giving the WHO basic control over our healthcare system. These amendments are supposed to go forward and be voted on the 22nd, May 22nd through the 28th, I believe, right? Is what the dates were. And at this moment, it's kind of crazy. And this is where Scalise and I, before we started this recording, what do you do about that? I mean, I'm at a loss on this one. If they can actually transfer this kind of power to an organization like that, I'm not even sure what you do. I mean, I know some are saying, get out there and protest this, that, and the other, but it's like I want this stopped. I want it stopped. And what's the pathway you take when something like this is done to actually getting it stopped? Because I mean, apparently the president can just send that kind of amendment over to an organization like this, and it's done. It's
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any idea how you necessarily stop it. I mean, even if we were theorizing, you say, okay, even if you got out there and protested this in the U.S., you're one of 194 countries, and the U.S. is the one who submitted it unilaterally from the executive branch without representation of the people. So whoever's voting for that, I mean, the notion that the submitter of a proposal would then turn around and vote against it is preposterous just to begin with. So let's hypothetically, you could say that enough protests in America in the next, whatever it is, 10 days you have. I mean, they didn't become public knowledge until late April that this had happened. So you had about 30 days to try to protest it. And even if you could get the U.S. vote to be no, it could still be yes from all the other countries. And this is why, like I said, Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution guarantees the states a Republican form of government. So I would say if there's any hope, it would be at the state level after this passes. So it would be the fact that the states are going to say no, like you violated the Constitution, we're not going along with it. But then again, like are we going to face a militarization in the states of the within the United States
And
themselves?
ones
Like
that
is
are
Florida going to
possibly
have their own
backed
military?
by our own federal forces.
Correct. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, you get into the situation where states would actually have to resist a military force of the UN. So you get, and I
So,
mean, but it would be very easy to do so because the Constitution says that the federal government's job and the president specifically's job is to prevent us from being invaded, and Biden's inviting the invasion. So doing the opposite.
yeah, so I suppose one of the only pathways forward right now, if this is what we intend for the UN to be, is if we're the ones that are actually footing the bill, the majority of the bill, what's the percentage on that actually? Need to look that up. Like, what amount of the UN's budget is provided by the U.S.?
It was something huge, especially before Trump. It was something outrageous where most people, many of the countries that were involved weren't even paying their bills. But I don't know either, so I'm not going to
Well,
comment. But I just know that it was extremely, extremely
I mean, I
unfair.
suppose one of the only ways to
Extremely
fight
unfair.
this then is to mobilize the citizen in all states to try and put people in that will actually support defunding this. If they want to go ahead and use it this way, I mean, let's go ahead and gut their ability to even flex. I mean, I suppose that would be the only routes we can actually take right now is to find a way to defund the UN, and hopefully actually dissolve it, or at least dissolve our involvement in it.
That would be the goal. Yeah, I mean, but that's a federal level, and just frankly, to be honest, over the past 2 years, the only hope I've gotten from anyone involved in government has only come from the state level. Since Trump left office, the notion that the federal government, and again, like with kudos to Rand Paul and Jordan, and when Nunes was still in there. I mean, and again, so I'm not trying to cast this disdain on everyone. Like I said, there's a handful at the federal level that are real fighters, but on the whole, I pull very little hope from what happens at the federal
What
level.
happens if the states actually, individual states actually rally together and decide to quit sending the federal government the taxes due? What about that kind of thing?
I have no idea. Well, I mean, yeah, that could happen with what's called a convention of states, and I'm this is more Glenn Beck's expertise, and hopefully I'll learn about it so I can speak to it going forward. But you can have major amendments to the Constitution, and you could have because I think the states are actually the tax authority, and the government just benefits from it. But there's some intermutual dependency there. So
Yeah.
not exactly sure those relationships, but you could have a withholding of taxes, but I think it would have to come at the behest of some sort of convention of states. So it couldn't just be one state deciding not to do it. I think there would have to be a. But I mean, we're starting to see that type of behavior. I know recently 20 attorney generals sent something to the Biden admin. I can't remember what it was on, but this was maybe a week ago. It might have been related to the abortion issues. I'm not sure, but you're starting to see where conventions of states are getting together. It's just not enough. I think you need 2/3 of the states for there to be an effective change.
I mean, if there was ever a time to go ahead and do that, I think, like right now, it needs to happen. If that's the kind of thing that's going to go on, we have to move. We have to move in a pretty, in a proactive way, because dude, this is this is so big. It's not to sound completely desperate. It's just a weird situation. It's one. I mean, personally, I don't know about you. Like, I actually haven't dealt with a topic like this one before, so I'm not entirely sure what to. Hey, we just I don't know what to do in this particular case. If that's possible, then our Constitution is pretty clearly something that doesn't matter. So.
Yeah, by the way, I am posting a few older stories because it's interesting that some of this stuff will come back to the fore over time. Because actually, Queensland, the crazy premier there, they're the ones that set up one of the inside Australia's COVID internment camp. It's in, and I think I'm posting a link to that. And just so you know, and then I'm also posting a link to the internment camps that they call the green camps that the CDC, which again is not a part of our government, that is a privately funded private public partnership. And so this is globalist influence. So if you trust the CDC, understand that they don't have the United States, even they're not even working within the United States government as part of it. They work in coordination with it, but if you look at their list of donors, it's like, oh, Moderna and Pfizer are some of the biggest ones. No conflict of interest there. But yeah, I'm posting this other story where, like, the CDC has set up, and there's videos of these in the U.S. COVID internment camps. And so it's interesting that, and this is set up by FEMA, I believe, that these things have been set up in preparation of people being basically put in concentration camps, but we never got there. And I think that's why we're seeing this move, this radical move, move, because Biden administration did it back in January, and we didn't find out about it until April. And I think they just haven't been able to achieve what they want. Plus, you got the
if you're going to get it right, like, at least put the narrative correct. It's shielding camps for the protection of the population against very dangerous, sick, elderly, and young people. They're taken to a place where they can be safe, and that the rest of the population can be safe from them. So it's basically a leper colony. It's very reasonable way forward for this one.
It's called the shielding approach, actually, but I think they are called green camps. You think green, you think happy. Like the market today is green. You don't want to say red camp.
So last time I read, it was directly on the CDC website. I'm pretty sure they were actually called shielding camps, unless they changed it.
You might be right. Well, I don't know. I just posted the link to it on the CDC's website. So if anyone out there is listening, you can go to our Telegram. And Aaron will put the link to the Telegram in the description today, so you can go check that out for yourself. So or you could put it up, Aaron, maybe when you edit this. It's there. You could get it accurate.
Well, people, thank you again for joining us today. This was an interesting episode. I hope you guys dig into this. We're not entirely sure what to say as to how to actually go about mobilizing to fight against this. I suppose, like other things, educate yourself on it. Make sure you're aware about it. But this is going to be a really hard one if it goes through. I'm not sure what that actually spells out for our future healthcare for individuals, families. But
our future health tyranny. Get it right.
But thank you for
not care.
Thank you for joining us today, and cheers.
Cheers.